Hey, everybody. This is Chris.
And Kathy.
We wanted to take a minute to thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate every listener and are grateful for this platform.
Please help us share our vision by subscribing to our show through your favorite streaming app. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Petability Podcast.
Check out our ever-growing list of affiliates and sponsors. Simply go to the show notes for information and links.
And be sure to use our promo code PETPOD22, that's PETPOD 22, on checkout to receive your discount from our affiliates. And now, here's a word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Alon Landa, CEO of MedcoVet, and I'm a proud sponsor of Petability. We decided to partner with Chris and Kathy because, like them, we want to empower all pet owners who are trying to do the most for their pets. At MedcoVet, we specialize in advanced home laser therapy for pets. Laser therapy is a safe and effective treatment for common conditions like arthritis and wounds, and it relieves pain for most conditions caused by inflammation. With MedcoVet, pet owners can perform this treatment at home while receiving support from experienced clinicians. If you think your pet would benefit from healing at home, visit medcovet.com, and one of our clinical experts will work with you to determine if home laser therapy is the right fit for you and your pet. Tell them Petability sent you.
A brace at its core is giving support to a joint, or you think about in construction, you're bracing something, you're providing extra structure around an area to make it more stable.
Welcome to Petability. I'm your host, Kathy Simon, certified veterinary technician, certified canine rehabilitation practitioner, and certified hospice and palliative care technician for pets.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston, licensed physical therapist and small animal physical rehabilitationist.
Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives.
Good day, Kathy.
Good day, Chris. What's going on for today's schedule?
Well, today in this episode, we are joined by guest Clayton Blunk from My Pet's Brace. He is actually one of the co-owners and the man behind the scenes who makes braces or orthotics and prosthetics for our pet friends. And I know we've talked in the past about the importance of getting something customized for our pets for the most success. And that is exactly what this company does. And Kathy, also, as rehabbers, physical rehabilitationists, you're a vet tech, I'm a PT, but we both are certified in canine rehab. We are often called upon to recommend these types of products, bracing, prosthetics, etc. So knowing who to reach out to, what's the good stuff out there, who has the best customer service. It is truly a team effort. And we are very, very excited to have Clayton Blunk on the show with us today.
And I love the topic of bracing, actually. It's one of my favorite topics, actually. And I'm genuinely impressed by how far veterinary medicine has come when it comes to the development of braces for pets. The idea that we can now offer orthopedic support for dogs in the form of custom braces is not just innovative, it's heartwarming. These devices make a world of difference for dogs suffering from injuries or joint instabilities or conditions like osteoarthritis, all while allowing a dog to continue to enjoy daily activities. So I'd love to learn more about customized bracing, and there's nothing better than seeing a dog get a brace and then feel like they can engage in the things that bring them joy. So I'm excited to talk about it again.
We're actually going to focus today on one of the most common orthopedic injuries in dogs, and that is the tear of the cranial cruciate ligament. Hands down, the number one orthopedic injury across all breeds, all lifestyles, and really can be debilitating because it causes a lack of stability in their knee joint. It's analogous to a human tearing their ACL, and we've certainly all heard about that. And we actually have a couple of shows dedicated to this type of injury. So tune into those for more information. How do knee braces offer a viable non-surgical solution for so many pets? This involves appropriate candidate selection to the manufacturing process, quality product, custom fit product that the pet will actually be comfortable wearing for an extended period of time. And then, as I alluded to before, the rehabilitation that follows. And so today we're going to cover the full journey of bracing and beyond.
I think I've mentioned this on other podcasts before that not only do I specialize in canine rehabilitation, but I'm also certified in hospice and palliative care. And so a fair amount of my patients who may have CCL tears are not good candidates for surgery. They have either significant medical complexities or comorbidities, or simply are at the end stage of their lives, but that doesn't mean they should be uncomfortable. So I think this gives us an option for patients who may not be candidates for surgery for whatever reason, medical reasons, end of life care. We should do our best to make those animals comfortable.
Absolutely. I actually had the privilege of meeting the original owners, the founders of this company. I was at the STAR conference, which is a big deal. It's one of the premier conferences for our industry as rehabilitationists. Their names were Jim Alamo, who is a certified prosthetist and orthotist, and Mark Harden. My Pet's Brace started in 2010. So we've kind of grown up together, and then fast forward now to Clayton Blunk being co-owner along with Anna Spangler. And this company has certainly expanded and grown. They now have 3 locations, all are on the East Coast. But I read on their website that they have now manufactured approximately 20,000 braces. It's interesting because Jim came from the human world as a prosthetist and orthotist, and it was their brainchild, I guess, to see how they might convert those skills over to the veterinary world. So to your point, Kathy, we have come a long ways in the last 15 years. I just really, again, look forward to Clayton sharing his story, the quality of the product, and, the types of candidates that they serve in our pet community. So let me tell you a little bit more about Clayton Blunk. He is the senior practitioner and co-owner of My Pet's Brace, as mentioned. Clayton's journey began with a mechanical engineering degree from Temple University, and his passion for animals sparked by volunteer work at the University of Pennsylvania's Working Dog Center inspired him to dedicate his skills to helping pets and their families live happier lives. This led him to hands-on orthotic training with the founder of My Pet's Brace in 2014. Clayton is a lifelong dog person, but he's now a proud cat person too, sharing his home with 2 Scottish Straits, George Michael and Phoebe. Clayton's commitment extends beyond his practice. He's a frequent speaker at veterinary and orthotic and prosthetic conferences, actively expanding knowledge in the field. So welcome to Petability, Clayton Blunk.
Welcome, Clayton.
Well, thanks for having me. I always look forward to talking about what we do in the veterinary orthotic space, but also I love talking about myself and my awesome cats too. So I'm really looking forward to spending some time together.
We saw your cat before we came on the air, and I can see why that cat is magnificent. I would be talking about that cat all the time.
Gorgeous. So the mission of My Pet's Brace, Clayton, is to offer unique dog orthotic and prosthetic solutions for the rehabilitation of pets so that they can lead active and happy lives. What do we need to understand about a CCL tear and how bracing is effective?
I would say back in the day, before veterinary care has grown to a position where it is, you might have had a dog that you would take to the vet maybe once a year, and they might have limped and said, "Oh yeah, well that's just Frank, he limps, and yeah, we don't know what happened." And not that you didn't care about your pet. There weren't options for surgery. Vets weren't even probably diagnosing cruciate tears. The big picture context is, these animals, mostly dogs in our practice, they need help. That they're living active lives, and the big picture of quality of life is if they can't do the things they want to do, or the families that love them can't enjoy them the way that they want to enjoy them, it's not fun for the families to have to deal with a dog that's limping around that they need help getting outside, or it's not fun to recover from a surgery that's challenging and expensive. And so it's hard to recover from these injuries with pure conservative management, where that's kind of where a brace comes in, where we can provide some support and help them be more stable while they're recovering naturally. And it really is, at the end of the day, a tool for a family to use to make their lives easier to manage these injuries, as well as make the pet's life better. I mean, it helped them be healthier, make rehab more effective, help them lose weight. I'm kind of getting rambling, getting emotional thinking about it, but is kind of why it's so important.
Clayton, before we jump into talking about the knee brace, can you let the audience know what is the CCL in the dog? What does CCL stand for? And how does it compare from the human, what we would call
Yeah, so
ACL in humans? Yeah.
CCL stands for cranial cruciate ligament. Compared to ACL in people is anterior cruciate ligament. So the key difference in the A and the C, the only reason why it's different is in people we say anterior and posterior, where anterior is our front and posterior is our rear. You think about someone's posterior, right? So if I was talking about your dog at home and I'd say, hey, where's your dog's front? Well, my front is where my belly button is. So is a dog's front their belly, their abdomen, or is their front their head and shoulders? And so that's where that cranial comes from. Cranial, like the skull, the cranium. So it's simply saying, hey, this ligament is pointing towards the skull of the dog. And then to confuse it even more, instead of posterior, they say caudal. There's a posterior cruciate ligament or a caudal cruciate ligament. So it's two CCLs in a dog knee, which makes it kind of funky. So that ligament, whether we're talking about a person or a dog or a cat, we occasionally get a cat that blows a CCL, which is pretty rare, but we've done a couple. That's a major stabilizing ligament in the knee that helps control excessive movement forward. So what tends to happen when they diagnose these injuries is they do what they call a drawer test or drawer sign. Think about your kitchen cabinets, the drawers slide forward. The knee shouldn't slide forward, or if it does slide forward, there that ligament is there to keep it from going too far forward. So one way I like to explain it, if anybody's listening that has young kids at home, like those cabinet safety locks or drawer locks, think about that cruciate ligament as like the child lock on the drawer to keep your kids from getting into something they shouldn't. And when that ligament tears, now that safety isn't there anymore, and that drawer can slide forward and cause harm or cause damage. And so we need to address that instability. We're creating movement in that knee that's not comfortable and not correct for that range of motion, and we're loading some of those other tissues that are in there, which we can have complications and secondary injuries if we don't stabilize it. So a brace at its core is giving support to a joint, or you think about in construction, you're bracing something, you're providing extra structure around an area to make it more stable, crossing that knee joint and allowing it to move in a way that helps it be, more supported, more stable, and more comfortable. And what we do with our design, we have either a strap that comes across the front of that shin bone, where what we'd call the tibial crest or tibial tuberosity, if we want to get more technically correct. And so we like to put a strap or a pad across that area to kind of help limit that movement forward. And as we get into this more, we can talk about kind of some different design challenges. Sizes of dogs are quite vast as far as very small dogs and very large dogs, how we make different decisions on design to make the brace as effective as we can.
Clayton, can you talk a little bit about the risk factors for cranial cruciate ligament tears or cranial cruciate ligament injuries?
There's a few different factors at play. Breed itself, where there's some research that talks about certain breeds are predisposed and have a higher risk of those injuries. I don't know off the top of my head what breeds those are, but last I recall, I think, believe it or not, like Newfies and some of the really large giant breeds have a little higher percentage, but they're not as common of a breed, so they don't present as often in our practice. But
Yep.
beyond that, I mean, obesity is a huge predictor if we've got animals that are carrying around a lot of extra weight. So there's definitely increased risks to putting extra stress on those tissues, on those ligaments and tendons in our joints. So dogs that are carrying around extra weight and not eating as healthily as they should are definitely predisposed. And just on the kind of the bigger picture too, I think some of the really highly active breeds of dogs are more likely to have kind of more traumatic injuries to these, where they are, some of the sport dogs or hunting dogs or just an active pet dog. They're more likely to have a little overactive day where they're going to maybe do some damage. Not that there's anything wrong mechanically in their joint. It's just they overload that that knee and can aggravate it. Just like you talk to people that they're athletes, they're runners, and they stepped wrong and they twist it and something happens. And then really our core population is like the more senior end of the spectrum, where they have other risk factors that make them not great candidates for other options, where they're coming to seek us out. One other piece of it from like the research end, we were kind of talking about that tibia itself. That's that shin bone. The way that is all put together, there's a part of that shin bone called the tibial plateau, or where if you remember, I don't know if it was geography class or some science class in elementary school, where you learn about land structures. A plateau is flat on top, right? So we think of a plateau as being flat, but there's a lot of research that shows that plateau is not flat, and it's actually sloped down backwards toward the back of the dog's leg. So if you think about trying to stay on the top of a slide and not slide down, we kind of get this predisposition where if that tibia is not as flat as it should be, we kind of get these chronic stretching of that ligament. And eventually you stretch something enough, like a rubber band, you stretch it enough times, it's going to start to get tears. So that's kind of some of the context of the history, or why we see some of these dogs that come in.
We'll be right back.
Hey, dog lovers, is your furry friend limping or struggling to keep up like they used to? It might be osteoarthritis, or OA, a common source of pain and mobility issues in dogs that's driven by inflammation in their joints. Inflammation is the silent enemy, not only causing pain, but also accelerating the progression of OA. Synovitin OA is a groundbreaking one-time injection into the arthritic joint that targets the very cells causing the pain and inflammation. By eliminating these harmful cells, Synovitin OA breaks the cycle of inflammation, offering up to 1 full year of relief right where it's needed most. Don't let your dog suffer from the pain of arthritis. Visit activedognow.com to learn more about Synovitin OA and give your dog the gift of long-lasting, pain-free movement again.
Studied in canine elbows, Synovitin OA is given by authorized veterinarians. Temporary discomfort and treated joints may occur. Talk to a treating veterinarian near you for more information, including what to expect following treatment, and visit www.activedognow.com. Feel that you really explained that well in terms of, causes and symptoms, and as Kathy put it, risk factors. Just wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. Based on what you said, it does make sense, because I think it all kind of comes down to physics, right? So you mentioned Newfoundlands. Well, they're a giant breed dog. And so the amount of force going through any joint, but, in particular, the knee joint, the bigger the dog, the more force it. And then I was thinking about what you said with older pets and things. And with our seniors, a sarcopenia occurs. And what that is with aging, and we all experience it, is that we start to lose muscle mass. And our muscles are really, really important in acting as slings and shock absorbers for our joints. So they're kind of secondary support structures. Ligaments connect bone to bone. So Clayton, as you described, it's going from the femur to the tibia, the thigh bone to the shin bone. But all those supporting structures, the joint capsules, the tendons, the muscles, they all play a role as well. And I think one thing that our audience should understand, and one of the differentiating factors between people, again, just a reminder that I came from sports medicine, working with people as a physical therapist, is that every step that a pet takes, there is a tug or a pull on that ligament that prevents that shin bone from sliding forward. Unlike people, we're stacked, we're bipedal. Our legs are essentially straight. A dog walks on a crooked leg. So that means, again, with ground reaction forces, when their foot hits the ground and that force goes up the leg, it in turn pushes that tibia forward. And it's that ligament that they rely on to keep that from happening too far. And so it tends to be a wear and tear process more often in pets than in people, where it is more traumatic. And, so again, you're skiing, you catch an edge, your knee twists or hyperextends, you're going to tear your ACL. With dogs, many of our our pet parents will say, I don't know what happened. They were just out in the yard. I was watching them. All of a sudden they yelped and pulled up lame, wouldn't put any weight on that leg. It tends to be the straw that broke the camel's back. That ligament had withstood all of these forces for all of these years. And then finally it just breaks down. And that kind of brings back to, when I was talking too about the forces, when you said active dogs and sporting dogs, they're going to be impacting more and putting more stress across that ligament versus a dog that's relatively sedentary and simply walking.
Right. And it makes me think, as you're talking, Chris, about the importance of, if you're going to have any type of bracing or orthotic, about the combination of using that supportive device along with your physical rehabilitation. I think it's the perfect marriage.
And Kathy, how many pet parents have told us, I can't exercise my dog now because they're injured and they're gaining weight. So even if they weren't obese to start with, they end up obese, and it's so frustrating, right, for the pet parent and things. So yeah, that's why the bracing again could really, really help, as Clayton said, to allow them to burn some calories while they're recovering from this injury.
Well, let's talk about knee bracing as a treatment option. Clayton, can you talk about how a brace supports the healing process?
Comparing bracing to surgery, we can start there and talk about that. So historically, people weren't really doing anything for cruciate tears for their pets. They were just saying, okay, try to take it easy, leash them up, they might get better. So we're kind of approaching bracing for this injury in the same manner, in the sense of our assumption and what we've seen anecdotally and kind of observed is that with support or with enough time, the body can fix itself. Not that it's a magical, don't go to the vet type of fixing itself, but the body's response to these kind of orthopedic injuries where we have a little ligament damage and things like that, they kind of get some inflammation, which not all inflammation is bad necessarily, right? And is a signal to the body that there's something amiss. And so there's cell processes in the body that say, okay, let's evaluate what's going on in our knee if we're talking about the cruciate. And I look at that cruciate as like, if either of you have long hair where you've got a hair tie, the old school hair ties that have that black sheath on the outside, and then there's the little rubber band fingers on the inside. If you think about the little bit of that ligament tissue is like those little fingers that start to tear. So you might have a few of those little fingers that have separated. So the body, evaluates that and says, okay, we've got some weird instability there. Let's start to build some scar tissue to try and connect the dots again, or connect those fingers again. And that's like doing some electrical repair where you've got a wire has some damage. You can kind of cut the bad part out and resplice it and put it back together, and it'll work like a wire pretty well. So again, that natural process is scar tissue. It's a good and bad thing, right? If you talk to a human orthopedic surgeon, they're going to say, "Oh man, scar tissue, it's pretty gnarly and it can get all messy in there," which is true. I'm not saying scar tissue in a pet is any different, but we're trying to take advantage the best we can these natural processes. So what tends to happen if we just said pure natural healing, and we hear this, I hear this all the time from when we do our kind of evaluation, when we talk to the families about the history of the injury and what's been going on. They go to the vet says, okay, we think you've got this injury, take it easy for a few weeks, take some anti-inflammatories, try as best you can to restrict your pet. But what tends to happen is habits are hard to break, both on ourselves as the responsible parties in the family, as far as caring for our animals, as well as the animals themselves. You might have a dog that loves chasing squirrels in the backyard, or loves chasing a tennis ball, or just loves jumping in the pool. And someone's going to forget about, oh yeah, they need to take it easy. Let's make sure they don't jump in the pool or don't chase a squirrel. So they start to feel a little bit better. Someone starts to forgets that they have this injury, meaning me as the pet parent, I forgot my dog has a tear. Not that you'd forget, just you have a lapse of judgment. You let them out, and then they were doing better, and now they aggravate it again, and kind of that's that process that starts over again, where they aggravate the tear. It kind of starts that inflammation again. They have to rebuild some of that scar tissue. And so it can kind of be this yo-yo of, oh, they were doing great for a while, and then they hurt themselves, and then they were doing great for a while, then they hurt themselves. So the idea of the brace, again, take advantage of that natural process, but make it much, much more difficult for them to aggravate the injury with the brace on. If we can provide support while that body is doing its thing, building that scar tissue, we can create not perfect 100% anatomically correct movement in the end, but create enough stability and create enough comfort where they're able to build those structures back up and build some muscle mass back up. And we can get into that more as we go, that they may not need the brace long term, or at least they can get around and have quality of life comparable to what they had before. Compared to surgery, where the basics there is they either go in with some special plates and screws to kind of realign the angles of the joint, like kind of we talked about before, that tibial plateau, or there's some other surgical procedures, or they go in and do like a fancy fishing line to kind of wire and kind of tie in a special pattern to kind of pull that joint back together again. And again, where we're still relying on things to kind of stabilize again and heal again. But yeah, coming back to the brace itself, if we can get that scar tissue to build, that's good long term for the stability in that joint. And then secondary to that, or kind of parallel, we need to provide some comfort back to that joint. You both have probably experienced seeing cruciate patients come in, or families that are listening that have had their pets have these injuries. They limp around, they're uncomfortable, they hesitate to lay down, they can't get comfortable, or they have trouble, doing their ones and twos out in the yard. We want to get them more comfortable so they're able to build, bear weight more and build muscle again. If all we do is rest them and keep them, I joke with my clients sometimes, if you could pretend your dog was a robot and they could do exactly what your vet is suggesting as far as restricting their activity and keeping them quiet and calm, they're going to build scar tissue and they're going to stabilize that cruciate again. But think about people that are recovering from injuries, knee replacements, hip replacements, where they've been laid up for so long, or maybe what the kind of the modern approach to these rehabs with those injuries is get them walking as soon as possible to help make sure that we don't atrophy more and more and more. Otherwise, you end up with a stick of a leg. And just like you talked about earlier, we need those support structures, or the muscles and the other structures besides the ligaments and tendons and things like that. We need those muscles to be strong to be able to kind of work in conjunction with the rest of that knee joint. It's a system that all has to kind of work together. So again, that overarching message is provide stability with the way that the brace is designed to keep that tibia from moving in a way that it's not supposed to help that scar tissue build, as well as provide comfort so that they're able to build muscle and get kind of symmetry back in their muscle strength, things like that.
Clayton, then can we talk about who is the ideal candidate for bracing? And is there ever a time when bracing is either not appropriate or contraindicated with patients?
It can be appropriate in a lot of different situations. We have surgeons that we work with that occasionally want to use knee braces post-operatively, or again, the majority of our patients are ones that are seeking an alternative option instead of surgery. I'm not anti-surgery in any stretch. It's a challenging recovery and it's expensive. So as far as ideal candidates, or what dogs or what animals may not be candidates, I mean, the ideal candidate for a brace is certainly the same ideal candidate for surgery, like the average age, average weight, average body type. That makes it very straightforward to make a good brace for those dogs. We start to have some challenges for some certain breed types, and we talk about like the bully type breeds, the bulldogs, Frenchies, the real stocky, pit bull type dogs, where they don't have a lot of structure to their joints, meaning they're really, really straight from the hip to the toes. Like you think about that classic bulldog stance, it's just like a straight line from hip to the floor. We don't have a lot of structures to grab onto. And then, or like the really, really short, stocky breeds, like your corgis, or dachshunds, where they've got such a short leg but such a wide, thick thigh. Think about like the leg at that point is like a giant funnel where we've got a tiny little like distal end, the bottom end of the tibia and fibula, the lower leg bones, that we're trying to hold this brace on, and the upper part of the thigh is just so big that it just is hard to control and hard to stabilize.
I think about like the Shar-Pei and how loose their skin is, and that seems to be a factor too. Will it move if the skin is really loose like that?
Yeah, I mean, Shar-Peis aren't as difficult as some of the shorter, stockier dogs. But we can talk about the mechanics of the big challenge in general with the knee brace, and then kind of talk about some less ideal candidates too. So the big component of any brace is suspension, meaning keeping the brace in the spot that we want. You know, so that for the case of the knee braces, we want that brace to stay so that the hinge, the articulation point where the brace is designed to bend, is following the movement of that joint itself. If it's, I mean, there's a little bit of wiggle room where it can be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, and it kind of self-locates to some extent. But the tendency of knee braces specifically is they want to slide down the leg because of the shape and taper of the dog's limb compared to a person's leg. If I'm sitting in my chair, I can kind of grab around the bottom of my thigh close to my knee. It's about the same size as just below my knee. But if you feel a dog's thigh or dog's leg, they're just so much more muscular in a shorter area. So just that shape and taper is much more challenging. So suspension is key. So specifically, you asked about Shar-Peis. Yeah, their skin is loose and it's a little bit challenging to hold on to, but they have an advantage of that loose skin kind of settles around that hock bone or the ankle joint there. So that's kind of where we anchor the brace from typically. So that kind of is a little bit more bulbous, and so we can grab onto that easier because just above that saggy Shar-Pei skin, we can grab higher, and it helps suspend the brace. So a lot of those don't have good hocks or good ankles, so we have a harder time holding those in place.
That was my next question. How do we accommodate for what we would call maybe tarsal torsion? It's rotating out, but the cuff would accommodate for that.
Yeah, I mean, we always have to get, case by case, we always have to get a little bit creative. We've got a few different designs that we use for what we call the suspension sleeve. There's a few different companies, or more than a handful of different companies, that do comparable braces as far as custom bracing for cruciate ligament tears. And we have our own little solution we call a suspension sleeve. And we have a variety of different shapes and sizes, or even just we customize it for each individual dog based on, okay, hey, they've got loose skin or they have some weird rotation. I don't want to say it's all able to be accommodated. There are some limits to what we can do, but we certainly approach it from what can we do, not we can't. Over time, as we've grown and evolved, we've continued to find more and more ways to say we can instead of saying, oh, we can't. Where a lot of the bulldogs, we struggled for a long time to figure out solutions to hold those braces in place. And so we're getting to a point now where it's much more likely we can say, oh, yeah, that's a good candidate, or a better, not as bad of a candidate as we used to. We educate the families that are exploring and inquiring about a brace, kind of, hey, this can be challenging, just making sure that they understand the expectations of this. This may be something they can't wear all day, every day, like an average dog might be able to do. This might just be able to be used for, just the activity times where they're on walks or more active. Because again, we're talking about, animals that are moving all sorts of different positions, and the range of motion of that knee, and how that knee and that leg changes shape from when they go to lay down or when they bring that hip forward to lay or squat. Like, just the proportions change a lot. The different breed types are definitely some challenges. But then again, we circle back to obesity. We talked about bracing can be a great solution to help these dogs get more active, but there is still a limit if they have a really, really, really big belly. That's a big challenge. Just sometimes of how they carry their weight, it can make the brace more challenging to stay up. So again, sometimes it's a carrot on a stick kind of a thing where, hey, you can use the brace now, but you need to continue to work on nutrition and exercise to make your brace stay on better. Or, hey, you really got to work with your vet or your rehab on a weight loss plan. We need to get a couple pounds off before they're a good enough candidate for a brace. It still all comes back around to communicating what is most likely possible and
talking about realistic outcomes for those patients. It would make everything a lot easier if we could go, you're a small, you're a medium, you're a large. But there's so many variations in body styles and weights and sizes.
Clayton, can you walk us through the process then of how these braces are manufactured, and ultimately get to that pet? I know there's quite a process involved, as you've alluded to, with all these types of dogs and their body types and so forth. So how is it customized? And, how do you make sure the fit is appropriate? What kinds of adjustments can be made? And are those always necessary? Like, what % need to be adjusted after, they're received?
There's kind of two parallel paths as to how this works. we can start with what it's like for the families that come directly to one of our facilities. As you mentioned earlier, there's our main facility in Eastern Pennsylvania near Philadelphia. That's where I close to where I live, and that's where all the manufacturing happens. And there are two other locations, one in the Pittsburgh metro, and then one kind of in the central Jersey near Atlantic City, kind of Jersey Shore area. So if you come to one of the My Pets Brace facilities directly, we do everything from learning about how you had the injury or how your pet injured themselves. We kind of evaluate and make sure they're a good candidate. We take a mold or take a cast to this is how it is custom. We take a physical impression of the dog's limb to use that to make a brace. So I'll stop there for a second and then I'll back up. So everything we do is from a referral or from a medical record from a veterinarian. We don't want to make any device for a patient that we don't know why we're making one. So, I would love to be able to take everybody's word that, oh, my dog has a cruciate tear, I need a brace, but there could be all sorts of other causes to a dog limping, and it isn't always a cruciate tear. So we at least like to have some records from a veterinary professional, whether it's primary vet, whether it's a rehab professional, whether it's, we get some like human prosthetists that help us out occasionally that they're kind of assessing the situation. So we want to have some referral to see the patient in our office. And then the same on the other end, if you're not within a driving distance to one of our facilities, you work with your local vet, either your primary vet, or we have resources to help you find a vet that might be willing to do a cast for a patient. So it's either work with us directly or work with a vet. They may want to do their own exam and make sure that they agree that the injury is what it is, to then take that cast. So once we receive a cast, either take one in our facility or receive one in the mail, we evaluate the cast itself based on breed, age, body condition, the injury itself, and decide, okay, what are some challenges that we might face, or how do we need to design this brace? Sometimes some pictures are helpful, but we really just use that impression itself to decide how the brace might be laid out, what type of joints we use, we have a few different types of hinges we use for the articulation of the brace, how we might suspend the brace, as I talked about before. We kind of lay out the groundwork for that decision-making process for the next few steps. So there's what we call a measurement form or measurement sheet that follows the fiberglass cast, that mold impression, to our manufacturing facility, where then the first step there is it gets poured. It's pretty analog. It gets poured in plaster of Paris. So we then basically have a shell of the mold that we then pour to make basically a positive model of the dog's limb to work with. And then again, we kind of we mark some of the anatomy so we know where the knee is, where the patella is, that the kneecap, where kind of the hock joint or that ankle joint is on the mold, so we can kind of get our reference points to design the brace. And then my team of what we call clinicians or practitioners that see the patients in our facility, we participate and work together to do what we call modify the molds, where again, we might have a dog that has a lipoma that we need to make room for, or just in general, kind of shape the molds in a way that kind of makes them a nice shape and nice and curvy, where we kind of shave it down and, sand it smooth and kind of do like drywall work at home. We mix up plaster again and kind of build up areas to kind of get it to be shaped the way that we want it to be for the next step. And then there's kind of some setup where we have some tables that are part of what we call a vacuum forming system, or vacuum tables, where we have different types of foams of different sizes that we lay on that plaster model, and then have dummy hinges, like rubber models of the actual real hinges that go on the brace, that we place on the model itself, on the leg, to again make sure that the articulation and the hinge of the brace matches how it should on the dog's leg in reality. And then we have I think 30 plus different colors and patterns that families can choose. So then we kind of either take the plastic that's colored, or we have these we call transfer papers that can create a fun color and a fun visual for the families. Again, they're going to be looking at these devices for a long time on their dog's legs, so we want to make sure it looks fun and looks cool. So it gets what we call from modified, set up, and then pulled, where we basically take this sheet of plastic that starts as a rigid piece of plastic and cook it in the oven, kind of like baking cookies, and it gets kind of soft and pliable, and then it gets draped over that model with foam on it and gets vacuum formed or pulled around to the shape that we want it. And then there's machining, where it gets kind of rough cut and then kind of refined and machined to the final shape that we want. Again, the shapes and proportions are all kind of determined by how we've specified that measurement form in the beginning. So then the technicians that build the braces then know how it should look, or if there's certain things that they need to be aware of about, like I said, a lipoma that they need to make room for or pad it a little bit differently. So they machine it to the shape that's appropriate. And then we have a variety of straps and pads and things that they choose based on the proportions and the sizes to put straps on it, put buckles on it, and then it gets finished up. That's a pretty surface level overview as far as the steps of the process for the manufacturing. And then again, families that come to see us directly in our facilities, and they come back for what we call a delivery or fitting, where then we have the finished brace, we have this assumption of how we designed it, but then we know something that we take a cast where it's kind of a static, standing still mold. We want to make sure that the dog can move around comfortably, sit down, lie down, get back up again, and the brace stays in the right spot, doesn't rotate excessively or doesn't slide down the leg. So that fitting process is also really important, where we sometimes have to trim some material off the top end of the brace, or what we call the proximal margin, proximally in like the upper part of the brace, or the distal or the bottom of the brace sometimes is a little bit long, or occasionally where it might be a little bit tight, where we have to widen it, or a little loose, we have to tighten it. All those things are possible in that fitting process. And we kind of give ourselves a little bit more leeway on the ones that we fit in the building or fit at one of our facilities, because we know, okay, we have direct access in our area where we machine the braces. We can trim it relatively quickly and adjust it. Where families that can't come directly to us, we might be a little bit more conservative with, we might trim the brace a little bit lower just to say, okay, maybe we don't want to have to have it sent back and forth. Occasionally it happens where, the brace is a little bit too tall on the thigh area or in the groin. We need to adjust that top trim line, or it might be a little bit tight where we generally ask for some videos or some pictures of how the brace is on and kind of help assess, sometimes jump on Zoom and say, hey, show me all the angles. It is challenging to translate something that I wish they could be hands through the screen, reach out and touch and feel. And this, again, you're both in the rehab space, it's a very hands-on practice, and I'm not comparing myself to your skill level at all, but it definitely can be so much easier just to reach out and touch it and say, oh, here's exactly where it's tight. The big challenge, and Chris, you can speak to it in your PT world, working with animals. You could ask your patient, hey, does this feel better or does this feel worse? Or where is it pinching? Or, hey, is it making your foot go numb? Like, it has its own challenge for the families that are in the building, where I can talk to face and understand what's going on with their animal's behavior, what's going on. But I also have to read the animal's behavior and say, okay, hey, based on how they're acting, this is what I think is going on. Here's how I'm going to make it better. But the advantage, and I'll back up a second, I don't want to say we're the only brace manufacturer that sees pets full time, but I know that's one of the things that we do that's unique, is that we have that in office or in-house caseload where we're kind of trying things, evaluating what we're doing. Not that the other companies don't, but we have that kind of more direct approach where, okay, hey, we had Fido last week that had this interesting conformation, and then next week we might have a cast or a mold that looks similar. Hey, we can try the same approach with this case. And so I think that helps us really evaluate what we're doing for the families that can't come to our facility, where we kind of have been able to evolve the process. So again, circling back a little bit, so if the brace needs to be adjusted for people that can't visit one of our facilities, communicate with them over email, Facebook Messenger, Zoom, any way that they can get a hold of us. This kind of process would start with kind of our front office administrative staff to kind of ask what concerns they have, and then it gets hand off to my clinical team that, we kind of support the cases through and through, whether it's communicating with the veterinary professional that referred the case in the first place or directly with the family themselves to kind of touch base and troubleshoot, make sure that they're being able to be successful. Getting that initial fit right ultimately sets the groundwork for success in the long term. We're asking these people to use the brace every day for a number of months. So we need to make sure that the fit is appropriate. Otherwise, it's not going to be comfortable for the.
It's not going to, it's not going to be comfortable for daily wear. Clayton, can I ask you, what's the typical acclimation time for a pet? Once we have the correct fit, it's fitting nicely, doing what it's supposed to do. How long does it take the patient to acclimate to that?
That's a great question. I'll talk about how we propose kind of our acclimation period, and then I can kind of talk about some interesting dogs will be dogs occasions. So we talk about kind of introducing the brace slowly over a period of time. When we like to recommend when you first receive the brace and you've kind of checked the fit, you feel like things are appropriate, you can start what we call the break-in process, where they can wear it a few hours in short sessions throughout that first day. I like to recommend a lot of repetition, both from a behavioral end on the pet itself. They can kind of start to get the routine. Okay, what am I supposed to do when mom or dad have this brace in their hand? Or, like, do they need to be laying down? Do they stand by the door and be excited? We need them to understand that the brace is something that's going to allow them to get out and do fun stuff again. Not necessarily right away, but start to look forward to those things that those pets are missing out on from these injuries. So repetition is key for any learning, right? But especially for our pets, they learn by that reinforcement learning. And so getting that positive reinforcement with the brace to pair it with something that they enjoy. I want the brace to be more of, hey, like, let's go out and do something fun. Let's go for a walk. Let's go play outside lightly with careful restriction in the beginning, but start to pair it with something that's fun. And so day by day, then we ask the families to add a little more time, all the while checking for potential little rubs or hair loss or just awkward, weird, funny walks and things like that, where some of it's normal as part of the acclimation period, not big rubs and things like that, but a little bit of redness that goes away quickly is totally fine. So day by day, you're going to add some time until they're wearing the brace, hopefully from putting it on in the morning, taking it off at bedtime would be the most we like to have families wear it. We don't like to recommend overnight wear or wear when they're in a kennel or a crate, just because there's too much temptation. If no one's around to keep an eye, it becomes a nice portable chew toy for some pets if they're big chewers. So on some cases where we're having direct veterinarian intervention where it's like, hey, this is post-op, they need to have this brace as close to 24/7 as possible to protect the surgical site, things like that. Obviously, if that's what has to happen, it's a little bit more challenging, but it can happen. But we'd like to try and have that acclimation period be slow and deliberate to kind of make sure that we're starting off on the right foot, pun intended, where they're able to acclimate well and be comfortable and be ultimately like happy with the brace.
In my years, over 20 years of working with pets, I've had a handful of clients that have invested in a brace with good intentions, but then do not use it. How would you say that the owner compliance is from your perspective?
It definitely is a challenge. Not that I can put any brace on any dog, right? But we can make a great brace that fits perfectly. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it has to be something that everybody involved in the household, mom, dad, kids, grandma, whoever's around, dog sitters, kennel, if they go to doggy daycare, everybody has to be involved and understand how to use the brace. If you don't have everybody buying in, it's not going to work as well. So again, that's the advantage of our families that can come to visit us in person. Those are questions that we ask. Is everybody in the house going to be able to be on board with this? Or, hey, do you have any of your own health issues that are you going to be able to sit on the ground or pick your dog up and put them up higher where you can put the brace on? And we kind of have them practice and evaluate their own skill. Or if we have families themselves that have their own disabilities, hey, how can we make affordances, make changes to the way that the brace is secured to make it easier for you to use? A couple of years ago, we had a gentleman that was disabled in a wheelchair, and he had his hand was contracted where he didn't have use of his fingers, but he could use his thumb. So we made special loops on the end of the strap so he could loop it with his thumb and pull the straps on and off. And that was, again, just a small little thing just to make that compliance part easier. Or again, I had a client earlier this week that has, actually two this week that I communicated with that have, pretty bad neuropathy and back pain where bending down and getting up and down off the ground to put the brace on the dog was going to be a challenge. And so it's some of that is reality that we can't make go away, but a part of it is, educating the families if they come to our facilities, working with my administrative team to educate families that don't get to speak to that might not come to our facility, and also educating veterinarians and rehabs about what the process really is, so that it can really be that asking themselves the question, or I ask that, don't always ask that question directly, but is the brace the right solution for you and your family? It may be the great solution for your pet, but is it actually a great solution holistically, right? Like same with the surgeries. Surgery ultimately is the gold standard of these cruciate tears, but is it actually the right solution for the whole family? It might be best for the dog, but are there a ton of kids that aren't going to close doors when they're running around in the yard, or are there a lot of steps and you're an elderly person that can't carry your dog up and down the steps? That compliance end is a big component. So on the customer service end of what we try to do, almost make someone not want to get a brace, because I'd rather have them talk with me for an hour and say, you know what, thanks for sharing all this information. I don't think this is the right solution for me, than regret. And we've got veterinarians across the country that recognize that we really provide that level of care to kind of walk people through step by step. I know I'm confident in our ability as a team to really give people the support and that service that they need to be successful.
Let's talk about costs. What can the average pet owner expect for a knee brace?
So for knee braces specifically, we kind of have two price points, but we've really been narrowing it down to just one for the past year or so. The average brace is $899. That's the cost that we charge as My Pet's Brace. If you are working with your local veterinarian, they may have costs associated with taking the cast or doing their pre-evaluation process, or if they want you to come back for the fitting, there may be some extra charges there. On some really, really, really big dogs where we have to use a special mechanical hinge, we sometimes charge a little bit more, where it could be, if I'm remembering right, $11.99. But has been very rare lately with some other changes and developments of the brace that we've done. So around $1,000 plus or minus is kind of the brace cost to the families. And for at least the way that our process works, that's inclusive of if it has to come back and forth for adjustments during what we call our warranty period. We call it a no hassle warranty period. No hassle meaning if there's adjustments that you need, if you need straps, if something gets chewed on, if we need to replace straps under that warranty for 4 months, 120 days from when you receive the brace, we cover that. So again, that includes if it has to come back and forth 5 times for adjustments. We've eaten that before. And I mean, I think, again, not to speak ill of any competitors, but I know some other companies have some limits where it's like, oh, and you can come back twice in the first 30 days. And if it's not, then if it's at that point, it's, an extra cost to send it back and forth. I just don't like making it difficult for people to reach out and ask about concerns. In the same manner, for our families that come to our facilities, we never charge for like a recheck. We'd like to check in on their progress periodically. And if I have someone that got a brace a year ago and they said, hey, you know what, my dog's doing great, but we're picking up a new hobby, or I like hiking more, and I just want to make sure the brace is in good shape just to have if I need it. Can I come in? Sure, absolutely. I want to take that objection away of, it's already challenging to care for our pets and care for ourselves, frankly, and take the time out of our work days, out of our schedules to go to the vet. I want to make it as easy as possible for someone to pick up a phone and, reach out and have get some help if they need it.
I usually like to bring this up almost every podcast and about a pet's emotional experience. And I think that providing a pet with a brace or a supportive device can be life-changing and life-altering for that pet, because they can now engage in making their own choices. They can make a choice to go outside. They can make a choice to go into the sun or into the shade. They can make a choice to get up and get some water. They can make a choice to play or walk or hike or engage with the family. What do you suspect, because you can't speak for the animal, is their emotional experience around it?
I have a favorite story that has stayed with me for, I guess this was probably the first year that I started working at My Pet's Brace. This is 10 plus years ago at this point. It was a quite large and less than friendly Rottweiler. I love Rottweiler. They're hilarious breed, but there certainly can be a little bit more challenging to handle, especially in the veterinary environment. So this was a big female Rottie named Sugar. She came in on a big beefy leather harness, and I think she may have had a muzzle and just kind of that like very, very unsure of me, hard barking, didn't want me to come close, was probably a little bit of a handful to take a cast. And I was like, man, this dog is, I can make this brace, but I don't know if we're gonna, how well we're gonna be able to work together. And speaking about my bio in the past, like I've worked with tons of different dogs at the Penn Vet Working Dog Center. I've done shelter volunteering, so I'm comfortable. I was a dog trainer for Petco for a year or two when I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. But anyway, so we got our best cast done. They came back the next week to fit the brace. Again, was not thrilled about me touching their injured leg, not thrilled with the sounds of the Velcro, just all the while not the most cooperative patient. But then at that time, we used to do a pretty early recheck after a few weeks. So we had them come in about 3 weeks into the appointment. And the family, they were great people. And Sugar came running in, wagging her tail, wiggling. And they go, she never drags us anywhere. And she pulled us from the car to get in here. And then she was happy to let me rub up on her. She would let me do anything. She had enough understanding that this was the place that made her leg feel better.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
And like you think about all the time animals' capacity for understanding things, and that still has stuck with me from a very, very early part of this process and in my journey with bracing and things like that. And I still am always amazed both at how animals handle being in our facility, because we're not quite as weird as a vet. Not that vets are weird, but just like the smells, the sounds.
Oh, yeah.
We're a lot more relaxed environment. So the animals tend to do really well at our facility. But just in general, how well they're able to adapt and understand and succeed. And time again, whether from a behavioral perspective where animals accept it and are happy to visit us again, or just physically accepting the brace itself, I just have been always surprised and always happy. And maybe that's what brings us all to this field, is that just the capacity for animals to understand that we're there to help.
Clayton, as we're wrapping up, I'd really be interested to hear about some of the other products that you make.
We've got all sorts of different devices that we can provide. We have hock or ankle supports, or carpal or wrist supports. I'm just using human terms and dog terms. We make elbow braces occasionally. We make the occasional prosthetic. Most of our prosthetic cases are ones that we can see at one of our facilities locally. Just the intimacy of how those need to fit to function appropriately as far as the way that we like to present it. We'd like to see those patients, but more and more we're able to kind of evolve how we manufacture them and make them not that they were overly complicated in the past, but make them in a way that can be more accessible to families that aren't able to drive to one of our facilities.
Clayton, you've certainly shared so much with us today and gone into great detail, and we appreciate that. But I did want to mention that your website is also fantastic, very comprehensive, very informative. That is mypetsbrace.com. So just like it sounds, so mypetsbrace.com.
We have a TV show that is on Fox, syndicated nationwide on Saturdays. It's kind of an educational piece. It's not necessarily about us, but it's about on the families and how we make certain kinds of braces and things like that.
Can you send us the information, like how people can find the syndicated TV show on Fox?
Yeah, I think there's probably a little blurb on our website somewhere, but I can make sure to. But yeah, it's kind of family friendly educational component. It was really fun to do, kind of get to tell those stories and kind of share those experiences that the families have, and again learn more about the families that I'd worked with for years. We met as puppies, and now they're 11 years old, and we've seen them their entire lives and get to see them a few times a year, and really get to know people. But yeah, so the filming that show and seeing some of the backstories of how some amazing parks that they live near, or great backyard that the dogs just were having a blast, getting to see that full picture is really makes that even more special.
Clayton, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing what you do to help all of our pet friends. And let's hopefully do more future collaborations.
It was really fun to take some time to talk with you both and share, what I'm really passionate about. I see the vision and want to continue to move it forward and grow the industry and build the relationships that we have with everyone involved across the country, and just kind of be there to be a resource and be informative for the families.
Thank you for being here. This was
Thank
really
you.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Petability fans. This is your host, Kathy Simons. Do you live with a blind or visually impaired dog? Don't let vision loss stand in the way of a full, joyful life. In my book, Blind Devotion, Enhancing the Lives of Blind and Visually Impaired Dogs, I share my expertise and passion to help pet owners like you navigate life with a blind dog. From adapting your home to building trust and confidence, this book is your go-to resource for ensuring your furry friend thrives. Your dog's vision may be limited, but their potential isn't. Empower your dog. Get Blind Devotion today at Amazon.com.